Hip hop has never been shy about giving artists their flowers, whether it comes from the fans or even the artists and their peers themselves. And most times, you can't give flowers without including a little bit of education as well. And thanks to the newest documentary, Tale of the Tape, available now on Amazon Prime, fans like you and I can experience both. Playing off the title, the film takes fans on a journey from the early stages of the mixtape to the present day, while giving an in depth look at the way DJs specifically pioneered the way mixtapes were created, sold, and critically received by listeners. From Brucey B to Kid Capri to DJ Clue and DJ Drama, viewers get to see exclusive interviews from some of hip hop's greatest DJs who helped make mixtapes the hot commodity that they've become over the years. And today, I have the privilege of being joined by the film's director, Malik Buie, to get a behind the scenes look at what it took to put this visual journey together. Malik, I'm so happy to have you on the show today. Happy to get the chance to talk this amazing documentary with you as well.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
Welcome to Hip to the Games, the podcast for you, the basketball junkie and the hip hop head. I'm your host, Desmond, and I too have had hoop dreams and enjoy the beautiful genre of hip hop and its history. Together, we will enjoy some of the greatest albums, songs, artists, players, moments, teams, and so much more, while even mixing the two on occasion, all in my hope that you remember why you love both or either of these to begin with. You'll soon understand that Hip to the Games is more than just a podcast, it's a lifestyle. And if you were looking for a platform that combines both basketball and hip hop, you've come to the right place. So to get right into it, man, first things first, I want to know about the process kind of leading up to the documentary. Take me through kind of your vision of what you had for the documentary, and why you felt like a documentary like this, especially with the focus on the DJ itself, was important and needed in hip hop.
Oh man, the process. So, this has been a long time coming, to be honest. I would like to say the seeds were planted many years ago as a kid, as I was very into hip hop, into mixtapes. When I was about maybe 12 years old, 13 years old, there was, Kid Capri was like the man. He was the man, right? I grew
Hmm.
up in Brooklyn. Kid Capri is from the Bronx. He sold his tapes in Harlem and in the Bronx, right? And they were $20. A long time ago, $20 was a lot of money to a kid 12, 13 years old.
Right.
Me and my friends got together. We pulled our money together so we can buy one tape and then we can like dub it. And we had
Uh-huh.
to draw straws on who was going to take this train ride for an hour at 12 or 13 years old to get said tape and then come back. That's
Wow.
where the story really started, right?
Wow.
Fast forward some years later, I'm producing at BT and MTV, etc. I'm working with a lot of artists. I'm meeting a lot of DJs. I became really cool with Drama, DJ Drama, when he would come on Rap City all the time. And I just felt like, the mixtape never really got its full story told. And to be honest, there's still more to say, but that's how it started. The journey started when I was I believe I had came back from working with Drama in Atlanta. And I said, I want to do something on the history of this. I knew that there were so many people in between and before Kid Capri and Drama. And as the years went by, you know, other artists from, whether it was Kanye, whether it was, Lupe, whether it was Big Sean, Kendrick, Cole, all of those guys really got their start with the mixtape,
Right.
you know, and it only makes sense that we always go back to the first element of hip hop, which is the DJ. And I wanted to be able to tell somewhat of a complete story.
Very well said. And boy, what the love of hip hop would do to a kid, right? To take the train
Yeah.
and scramble money, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, mom. My mother didn't know. I'm sorry.
well, hey, I guess you can look at you now and see that it all paid off and everything, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes,
Um,
indeed.
and that makes me wonder too. So was your interest always in the form of like entertainment, or like did you try, or should I say film rather? Or did you try DJing yourself as well? Like how did that spark get?
It's funny because I have I think everybody has a cousin or uncle that's a DJ. Let's start there, right? So my mom bought me a turntable, a portable turntable. I was a kid. She bought me that and like the Thriller album for Christmas. I
Oh,
had
wow.
primarily her albums that I would run around the neighborhood with and go to people's houses and we would kind of like, hang out and play music. I was an engineering major in high school, and while there, I took a elective class on television production. That's when I fell in love with television. I went away to college, switched my major, and I just really got into storytelling. You know,
Mm.
oddly enough, at Morgan State, I went to Morgan State University. My roommate, apartment mate, DJ Chaos, who I went to high school with, he was a DJ. So I do know how to like cut and scratch on actual turntables. I know how to blend. I am not good enough to DJ a party, but I feel like I'm good enough to tell a story. And yeah,
That's dope.
I know my limitations. So I'm not a DJ, but I'm more than happy to tell the stories.
That's dope. That's dope. And I think, I talk to a lot of the people in my circle about that as well. Sometimes it's one thing to be a fan, but sometimes that fandom, you got to be a participant at some point. So I
Oh,
see the same
absolutely,
thing in you as
absolutely.
well.
Yeah. I know. Like I would basically memorize when we would do a party what his playlist was, right? And this is early on before it's like a digital playlist. I'm like, oh, he plays these lists, these records in the order. Okay, and now that's what I would do around the house and kind of practice. But shout out to the DJs because honestly, it really is a tough thing, especially back then when you was lugging around 10, 15 crates of your actual records. Pre-hard drive. I don't want to date myself too much, but pre-hard drive era.
Very true. Very true. And you said it already, right? Shout out to the DJs. I mean, I think that's what fans will really appreciate about this documentary is that it's not necessarily just a documentary about the mixtape, but it's about the DJs that really paved the way for them to be successful. And with so many documentaries on hip hop in general, the art of rap, I think there are so many hidden and untold stories, right, to be told. How important was it to make a documentary that gave them specifically their shine in hip hop?
You know, I've always felt that, one, storytelling is my calling. It's not just a job.
Mm,
When you think of, you know, any type of important if you think of any type of important event in history that's been recorded slash documented, that's just important as when it actually happened, right? Think about MLK's "I Have a Dream" speech. It's one thing to hear it; it's one thing to see it,
mm,
right? I
mhm.
wanted people to see these amazing DJs from, like I said, from Brucey Bree, Kid Capri, SNS, Craig G, unsung heroes that are really important in this game of hip hop, and people that don't necessarily always get to like say what they've done, get a chance to get their flowers. Like they've contributed to a lot of things. Most people don't know, but SNS was integral in Mace and Cam and those guys getting signed. Mace and Cam, Kanye comes from that tree, Drake comes from that tree of, you know what I mean? And
Mm.
so it was that's why it was really important for me for like these guys to document things, as well as you have like, a guy like Lenny S, who's an A&R, who's been able to make some amazing, amazing music, everything that was basically under the Rockefeller umbrella, and contribute to mixtape culture. Most people don't know that. Lenny S is Ron G's cousin. You know, so for somebody that's like super, hyper into hip hop and the culture, he still comes from the mixtape as well.
Mm. Yes, and that's something I noticed as well. I'm like, you really get to appreciate the fact that they get to tell their stories. Like the way that the interviews are set up and everything, they get to tell their stories. And I think that that's really the best part of it all. And I think a great addition to tell the tape was the narration done by Royce the 5'9". Now, I wanted to know, what made him a good fit to narrate the documentary? And, why not, somebody might say, why not pick one of the DJs featured? Or, did you have other artists considered when making that decision?
So Royce, to me, one, I have myself and my fellow executive producer, Kim Osario, have an actual relationship with Royce. We did a
That's cool.
project with with him and Premier when they dropped their joint album together. She's
Hmm.
known him for years. I had met him a few years ago. Really amazing guy. In all my years of producing, to me, it's all about the voice. When you're gonna like narrate, when somebody's gonna narrate a story. Um, Originally, it was Big Tigger.
Oh wow.
Originally, it was Big Tigger. There was a lot of scheduling conflicts, and honestly, and with the post process, there were things that was changing left and right, and it was finally was locked. I said, you know what? There's another project I'm gonna work on with Big Tigger. Royce has an amazing voice. I did a documentary, a 5-part series years ago for BET, and Joe Budden was the voice of that one. Because Joe Budden was another one that I thought like these guys have amazing voices that like live on forever. There's Joe, there's Royce, there's Bun B, in my
Mm.
opinion. And Royce just look, nobody ever says Royce is whack.
Very true.
Right? Whether it's an underground person, somebody likes mainstream hip hop, and he's such a respected force in this industry. It just made perfect sense. And like I said, he's basically a friend and colleague, and so it just made perfect sense to make it happen that way.
I could certainly feel his sincerity as he was narrating the documentary. I felt like there, like you said, it was his voice. I don't want to sound too nerdy, but in the sense of like I could sense his passion for hip hop in his voice, but also his sincerity to really execute the vision that you wanted, right? To have these legends telling their stories. I think the reverence for those legends and then the reverence for hip hop as a whole, you can feel it as you watch the documentary. And I thought that, it worked out. It certainly worked out.
Thank you. And if anybody's ever met Royce, Royce is a serious guy. He's no joke, right? I think that's part Detroit. That's part, he loves boxing. He's in the combat. He's in the combat lyrically. So it was great to have somebody that can look at a script, internalize it, make it a little bit of their own, and keep it pushing. And again, I think he was the perfect choice.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And you mentioned how, this film was years in the making. And I think honestly, a beautiful thing that kind of came out of that was still being able to include segments from the legends, late legends rather, in podcast pioneer Combat Jack, and the great project prodigy of Mob Deep. Can you touch on how important it was to include them in Tell the Tape? And then more specifically, for those who don't know, can you kind of touch on how important Combat Jack was and still is to hip hop media?
Man, so I know at the time I was doing this documentary, I was still working at BET. I was director of music and specials, and Mob Deep they were on like a press run, right? And they were doing the Blue Note. I actually have their last live performance with a band together.
Wow.
Um, and I'm a close friend of their PR person, Mob Deep, when Clue and Envy and those guys back in the day, and SNS were doing like a lot of blends back in the day. They used a lot of Mob records, so it made sense. I wanted to talk to those guys, and then of course, the Queen's connection that they had with these mixtape DJs.
Hmm.
So I remember I got the call like maybe at 2 o'clock. Hey, they'll be at this place at 4, and you got till 5 to do the interview. And I was like, bet we're gonna make this happen. I've had a relationship with both of them. RIP Prodigy really to me is, golden era solo artist. He's up there, top 10. you
Absolutely.
know, in regards to Havoc, amazing producer. Like literally, when you go back and look at some of the beats that he's created, and you see what he's you're like, how did that happen? Because most producers, when you find they sample something, you're like, oh, they just did this. Maybe I could have done that.
Hmm.
Not what happened. Combat Jack, I met him through a colleague because he used to be an attorney.
Hmm.
And Combat was very, very inviting. He was a person that I would call for legal advice while he was doing the podcast thing.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, Combat is a trailblazer and a pioneer. And when you look at all of these guys that are doing all these numbers and all these podcasts, they all, I compare him to like Stuart Scott from ESPN.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Everybody can talk hip hop now on ESPN because of what Stuart Scott did and went through. And that's why all of these guys can have a platform because of the foundation that Combat made. And we did that at a bakery, a bakery in Brooklyn. You know, Combat had a wife, Combat Jill was her name, and she had a bakery. And he called me. Look, and as he was always super busy, but he always made the time to answer a call, answer an email, and whatever you needed from him, he was more than inviting. And that's why also he talks the legalities of the mixtapes in the documentary, right? We took him back to his roots of being a lawyer. He
Right.
talked about, the issues drama was facing. He talked about, 50 Cent being on the Billboard charts as a mixtape, which was really unheard of at the time. And I think it was great that we were able to show Combat so people can get like the full scope of who he was. He just wasn't, some guy with a microphone that was, talking. He was a very, very important part of hip hop culture and what we see now with podcasts and the format. He laid the blueprint.
Yeah, and you used the word inviting, and I think that's a really good word to describe his presence in the film because even me, I'm looking at it and I'm like, he seems like that just kind of dude where he was kind of like, oh yeah, like I could talk about these DJs like all day, these are my guys, he seemed like that kind of guy. And even me, like I remember even before I considered myself a self-proclaimed like hip hop head, I remember seeing his stuff all over YouTube, like when I knew
Right,
this much about him. And
right.
it seemed like the thing that got to me was like it seems like he has an interview with everybody. Like
Yes,
it's not
but
like, oh, this person turned him down, this person couldn't come. Like he has interviews with like everybody. And I
he,
think that's to your point, he's just that inviting guy.
yeah, and he had the relationships. Like, let's be clear, as a young black man slash lawyer in the entertainment field, when he came up, there weren't many like him, a handful, less than five. So he was able to work with everybody from, from Jay-Z, Dame Dash, Kanye, all of those guys, and a lot of the DJs. He was doing their contracts, doing their deals, etc. So it made sense once he got into, once he got into the podcast format, he was able to make a call and therein flowed all of the interviews.
Man, that's incredible. That's incredible. And I think as hip hop fans, we're really blessed. Again, like I was mentioning earlier, to look at this story being told from the legends themselves. And did you find it hard to get in contact with everybody? Were there some DJs that maybe you couldn't get? Like, how was that process actually getting interviews lined up with them?
I'll say this, I've been in production a long time. Talent wrangling, as they call it, can be a challenge at times. There were some DJs that I would call or email, and they would like, Craig G. We filmed in a pizza shop in Connecticut because it's like right near where he was about to have a show at, And
Okay.
then we unfortunately weren't able to make Ron G happen because he wasn't doing interviews at the time, which is fine. I Number Love, he's still featured in the film, but
Mhm.
he's not able to tell his story in the film. And trust me, that happens. You'd be surprised that a lot of productions where you're like, well, what happened to this person? Some people are just really inviting. DJ Drama, I went to his apartment at the time, amazing apartment, and this is pre-generation now because he has a mansion and whatnot, which is super dope. But he had this really dope apartment near Clark, Atlanta. And he, look, man, come on in. Don Cannon, same thing. DJ Sense, oh, come over to the crib. It's cool. This is the time. And I come over with my film crew and we just get to work. So majority of them, yes. And unfortunately, again, Ron G didn't make it. And uh, DJ K Slate, rest in peace. He was
Oh
not able
yes.
to make the film due to he had a lot of other stuff going on, and then unfortunately he passed away.
Yes, yes. And I think when you mentioned so the obstacle of talent wrangling, so when that happens, for example, with Ron G, is your brain immediately like, okay, I got to get to the person that's next closest to him that can talk about, does your brain kind of
Yeah,
do that?
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
We talk about again because we have Lenny S, who basically Lenny S's cousin, this guy named Big Light, was Ron G's manager back in the day. And I can talk to Lenny about Ron. I can talk to other DJs about Ron. I can get other archival footage and still feel like I have a fulfilling story.
Mm.
Because again, I don't, as a filmmaker, you never take it personally. You never know what people are going through in their lives. Because somebody can give a respectful no, and some people can be non-responsive. Some people might be the opposite end of it. And so, you give them grace and say, okay, cool. You didn't make this, you're not able to do this. That's fine. But we still going to show love because what Ron contributed to the culture, cannot be taken away. He would come to Morgan State when I was there. We actually had do a party one year. It was SNS versus Ron G. Like that
Mm.
was the party. We had them in two separate rooms and let them battle it out. And we let the crowd kind of make their choice. And
That's dope.
you
That's
know,
dope.
yeah. And so yeah, much love to Ron. And again, like I said, talent wrangling from anything, from podcasts to TV shows to films. It can be a challenge. That's why there's normally one person or two people dedicated to only doing that. you know.
Makes
But
sense.
yeah, I'll pick up the phone. I'll call somebody directly, say, hey man, this is what I'm doing. I would love for you to be a part of it. And you'll be surprised when people feel that personal invitation, um, you get a lot more yeses than nos.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. As far as the sincerity and the love and the genuine
Yes,
spirit that's getting poured into the film, that's always appreciated, I imagine. Um,
yes,
and then even including the a couple MCs, right? Because even though it's DJ based, there are some interviews from some MCs like Big Sean, and
yes.
again, what's going to stick out to people, this is, you know, short hair, goatee Big Sean. This is when J. Cole was looking like Tobias Harris, you know what I
Yes,
mean?
right.
So
Yeah. What
how
people don't know is that Future, that's his very first interview on television. Like, because I was doing some other stuff at the time for a different platform, and we were able to film with him. That was one of his first times to New York. We sat in his park and just kind of, talked. So that's early Future as well in regards to like television screen appearance.
Wow. Wow. And I think, that's not surprising because even on that little part, I was like, he sounds, or I mean, obviously you could see it, but I'm like, he sounds so young,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I was
crazy.
able to catch them all when they were babies, which is, again, to me, is very, very important because you can always film a brand new interview with somebody, but getting archival, you had to be there.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think, and it had to be special to just know that you had that footage, but then it's like, dang, like look at where these guys are today because of the mixtape. Like these guys are still going strong, very strong to this day. Like,
Yeah.
was that also kind of serving as a touch of inspiration for maybe artists or listeners in maybe their own career paths to where they could see like, hey, you know, it all started with one little domino and here they are today. Like you can take the same approach to your career as well.
Yeah, I think that also with a lot of those artists specifically, they saw what happened with 50, they saw what happened with G Unit. Joe Budden says in there, I did it first because that's Joe, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
we all love Joe. But I do think, them seeing the success that these stars, and 50 is a superstar, right? Them being able to see, oh, well, I can do my version of this. That was their inspiration to like keep forging ahead. J. Cole was, when he went to Syracuse University, took some business classes, had his team around him the entire time. The same guys that was with him that day when we filmed, when he's shooting hoops in the park, those are the
Hmm.
same guys around him right now.
Mm.
And much love and respect, you know. And so I do think that, again, uh, from from Joe Button, Cameron slash Dipset, and 50 Cent, they provide a source of inspiration for Cole, for Drake, for Nicki, for Big Sean, for Future, to keep it going because they knew what they could become once those mixtapes became popular. And we have them, speaking at different panels. We got, Kendrick speaking at a bit different panel. We had Cole speaking at a panel, just talking about their drive and how, those guys weren't going to be denied. They weren't,
Oh
they're
yeah.
that talented. And it served as a force for me because I'm like, I've got to get this out in the world. People have to see this, you know. Um, and I don't care if it was 20 years old or 30 years old. It was going to see the light of day, and I'm happy it's here now.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it comes at a great time too. Like I said, just knowing the success that all those artists you mentioned have amassed over the years, it's just a kind of testament to that work ethic that they've put in, and the belief in themselves that they had. As a fan of Hip to the Games, not only should you show your love for the podcast, but you gotta express your love for basketball and hip hop. With a wide variety of clothing and accessories, there is always a way to show how much the game of basketball and the game of rap means to you. Let everybody know what it means to be hip to the games by clicking the link in the episode's description to cop some merch and represent the H2DG lifestyle. And as far as the outline of the film, the way this documentary is formatted is just dope because I think it allows viewers to appreciate the evolution of the mixtape. Like it seemed like everybody was just they built off the greatness of the previous DJ, and that can be a hard thing to do when you want to be original, and especially those early years of hip hop where you had to be original, and even then you're still fighting to keep hip hop alive. Um, who would you say is the target audience for this film though? Because as great as it is, it's also very educational. So is this for somebody like me who's in their mid 20s but wasn't around at that time, or is it for somebody who might be older and might remember these DJs? Where was your kind of target audience set on?
It's funny because, working in television, whenever you produce something, they call it the demo, the demographic. Who is this for?
Hmm.
And I think it casts a very wide net. Honestly, I think it's anywhere from 18 to 60. If you love music, you love hip hop, you love DJing, you love uh, artistry, you love storytelling, all of that. If you love any of those things, just one is for you.
Mm.
you know. Um, and I'm really grateful to tell the story. I'm really grateful for DJ Envy coming aboard to be an executive producer. I met DJ Envy when I was at Morgan State. He was at Hampton. I had a mixtape. I had a store that we sold mixtapes at. Him include their mixtape was way different than everybody's. Theirs was shrink wrap. They had barcodes. They kept track of the originals versus the duplicates. They took it to a whole nother level. So for
Hmm.
me being able to years later circle back and he's, part of this project, really, really dope. And I don't even know if he remembers that time when he came. He was, Hampton is in Virginia. He's from Queens. Baltimore is kind of in the middle. So he was driving through to get to school. And that's when we like first linked up forever ago. Um,
Wow.
but like I
Wow.
said, you know, this doc is for everyone. Um, as Big Daddy Kane says, 8 to 80.
And I think that's a special thing too, because it's like not only is the documentary literally good at establishing the connection between DJs, but you get to really see how literally a lot of these DJs were connected, that they were this person's cousin or that
Yeah,
person's neighbor. Like I think that's just so fascinating to me.
man. Kid Capri not having headphones that worked when he first started DJing. you know, and Brucey B. You know, literally recording one by one. I've had those tape dubbing machines. One, they were very expensive back then, but it's not like now where you can like, you know, upload 10 gigs in 30 seconds. It was a real time thing. So if there's 10 1 hour tapes, it's gonna take you 10 hours to duplicate this
Mm.
and then you get to sell them. And but being able to tell a story and these guys being able to tell their stories of how they all built off of one another, right? That is the true evolution. And that's the revolution of hip hop. Everybody makes their product a bit better than the last.
Mm.
Um, and I wanted to make sure that the world got to see that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this next question, because this is a hip hop and basketball platform. I noticed everybody was calling Kid Capri Michael Jordan. What was it about Kid Capri that he's the MJ of this DJ thing? Is it the fact that he was able to enter the DJ in rooms that hip hop may not have thought the DJ or hip hop itself could be in? Like, how is that?
So uh, it's like now, right? There's always MJ, but now you have like Anthony Edwards, right?
Hmm.
Everybody's like, oh, they just have an it factor,
Yeah.
right? Kid Capri won. he can really rock a party. Like there's a difference from DJing for radio, DJing for a mixtape, and DJing for a party. Some people can't do all three. He
Mhm.
was able to do all three. He was on Def Comedy Jam, which was Black culture at its biggest and brightest during that era. Not many other DJs could have even done that. And, you know, he was producing for artists. He had his own label. Man, the dude was moving. He was doing it. And that's why, to me, he was the Michael Jordan of this, because he was able to get love in the streets. He was able to
Mhm.
get love in the corporate in the corporate world, which is huge. I mean, let's be real. That's where the biggest checks are cut. Yeah, it's cool to sell your mixtapes to, different hustlers on the street or just regular general public. But when, Def Jam or Def Comedy Jam is behind you, there's a whole other thing for your brand.
Absolutely.
And he's just that good. You know, he's just that good. And so yeah, Kid Capri is the Michael Jordan of the mixtape game. There's no shots at nobody else. I love all the other guys that we interviewed and the ones we didn't. But Kid Capri is that dude.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think I know a lot of those DJs would say the same.
Yeah, yeah. Some will, and some will be like, "No, it's me," and I love that because they all are competitive. But it's like being in the NBA, right? It's a fraternity to those gentlemen and women, right? They love and they honor and they really respect each other. I've been able to see that doing things for like Global Spin Awards and different DJ awards and events and whatnot. They really do, and I love the camaraderie that they have.
Very well said. Very well said. And I think, one of the reoccurring statements in the film is how mixtapes were so free. That was another thing I caught. So many of the DJs were saying, like, I felt free or I felt like I had this blank canvas.
Right.
It seemed like the possibilities were endless. And so, do you think the fact that DJs are artists too gets lost on fans? Is that another reason why a documentary like this is necessary?
Yeah, I think that most DJs they normally aspire to do something else, at a certain point. Again, Ron G went from blends to producing and having his own like kind of like boutique, label situation. Funk Flex, his albums were tremendous. You know what I mean? Mace freestyle is probably one of my favorite freestyles of all time off of a Funk Flex tape. Once Clue really kind of was the first one to get a deal as a mixtape DJ and say, I'm putting this out. But yeah, these guys all wanted to tell their stories of like, not just what they were doing, but what they had planned to do as well.
Mhm.
And a lot of them, they're on the radio now. They are the voices, of a certain generation, of a certain, space. Some are in Boston, some are in Connecticut, some are in New York, some are West Coast, which is amazing. And I just like to point out, I don't want to get lost in this get lost, but like DJ Khaled, you know, he got his start mixtape DJing, and then you have the mix show that they air on said radio station.
Mhm.
And all that is important, and all that ties in. And again, I'm just glad that these DJs got the chance to say it from their mouths.
Absolutely, absolutely, and of course, though, it seems like when hip hop starts to thrive, something always tries to come bring it down, and I think we see that with DJ Drama's story in particular, and I think whether you want to point to the way hip hop was seen as a trend or not real music, right? Like the way uh the Grammys had disrespected hip hop, with
Right.
DJ Jazzy Jeff, Fresh Prince. You could talk about the controversies that come with sampling, right? And similarly, it's just crazy to hear how, in hindsight, really like DJ Drama ultimately got a gun to his head simply because he didn't have the formal address on his tapes. Like, I think
Yeah,
it's a
there's so
reminder
many.
that hip hop is an overcomer. You know.
Oh, always, forever and always. There was always some technicality they'll try to find. At the end of the day, Drama was helping a lot of artists. He was helping a lot of labels promote and blow their artists up, right? And I think part of it is that you have departments that aren't talking. So from the promotional department to like the legal department, nobody's saying, "Hey, well, I actually sent Drama this stuff, and this is his formula. So let's lay off of him."
Mm.
Labels looking at it as, oh, we may be losing money because of this guy, et cetera. No, trust me, he's helping
Ah,
you make money hand over fist, and you are indebted to him. You know what I mean? And so it was a sad events that happened. And I'm lucky that they were open to telling the story. But it's beautiful that, they have their generation now situation with, Uzi Vert and other artists, and they're like uber successful. And it's amazing. That's an American story. Period. It's an American story.
it reminds you the thing that kept playing in my head. It reminds you that hip hop indeed don't stop. You can't stop it. You
Yes, no, you can't.
you'll
Some
never.
things are hip hop is an unstoppable force. It has always been that way since the 70s. It's been counted out time and time again. But it's been a voice for the voiceless. DJs are always you find them always projecting and always yelling because they're always gonna say, "This is our voice."
Mm, right. The megaphone. Hip hop is the
There we
megaphone for
go.
the world. Yeah.
There we go. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Something that stood out to me towards the end of the documentary was how mixtapes have changed over the years. I think especially with streaming, of course, even down to the ways I think DJs. I know it was mentioned in the documentary that they're not really as active as they used to be. If we're talking like scratches and whatnot,
Right.
I think I had a lot of mixed feelings about it all. More so in terms of like, dang, it just seems like the DJ's been pushed out and all that. Like, what what's your answer to the question that was posed at the end, right? Like, where do you see mixtapes going? Where do you think they are? Like, how do you see the future of that?
Man, everything is cyclical. So I think at a certain point they come back in a different sense. But right this second, I would say it's the playlist. I think it's the different playlists that artists put up on Spotify. I think it's what they put up on Tidal. You have things like Rap Caviar. So you don't always have, unfortunately, you don't always have DJs. Sometimes you have what they call influencers or tastemakers that, put together their playlist. But I think that's where it's at the moment. I think that, just due to the evolution of the music and the music business, DJs are doing a lot more things. They're able to do a lot more parties. I mean, look, you had D Nice do Club Quarantine, and right,
Arian.
that was a live, that was an Instagram live mixtape, point blank. So you get you're gonna have a lot of virtual sessions, but again, I do think it'll come back to them having a bit more mixes on certain platforms. Not there won't be physical copies, but there'll be digital copies.
Okay. I can see that too. I could see that too. A very especially when in terms of playlists. That's kind of where my mind was going to because I know again it was mentioned in the documentary. I'm like that certainly seems like where it's heading.
Yeah, this young man, his name escapes me, but during the pandemic, there's this young man that he was doing blends. He kind of blew up. He did a record with Fat Joe, and it was like and Rihanna. He like did a blend. And so it took me back to I'm like, oh, and everybody was talking about his
Oh,
mixes, and
you
I'm like,
talking Amorphous?
yes, and
Yes.
more
Yeah. He's
exactly.
crazy.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's Ron G, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's Kid Capri.
Yeah.
That's SNS. Like he's taking different R&B, whether it's Aaliyah, blending it with Fabulous, like, and shout out to him. I actually met him at a BT Award event. I told him, I said, man, what you're doing is really, really dope. I don't know if you know the history of it, but again, it's all cyclical. But I see a bit more like DJ Amorphous kind of like, popping up and whatnot. But again, I think it's all virtual at this point. It's all digital. I think we've gone away from the physical copies.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Now, was there anything in Tale of the Tape that might have surprised you, or was there some things that you learned yourself while making the film?
Um, so doing a lot of these interviews, we give people their questions in advance. We try to at least, and every now and then there's like somebody tells a really amazing story of like you're like what? And I think it was when SNS talked more about, you know, SNS and Lenny S. They both spoke of the same situation. I'll give you two. SNS talked about again. So Harlem World, you know, was a group that Mace put out once he got on. But again, before that, it was Mace, it was Cameron, it was Big L, it was McGruff, and there was a rapper named Bloodshed, R.I.P. They were a group, and basically they came to prominence from being on an SNS mixtape. Now, everybody mostly knows, oh, they think, oh, well, Puff discovered Mace, and then Big discovered Camp. But now these guys were high school friends on the block, all of them crazy nice,
Yeah.
like, like really nice. You know what I mean? Um, and another one was Lenny S talking about um, uh, it was a DJ Envy when he did a exclusive. He got his hands on an exclusive from Biggie and put it on a tape.
Oh, yes. I remember that part.
That was right. And how, Puff and Big wanted to hurt.
Yeah.
They were looking for him. They were looking for him. Put it that way. Put it that way. So those, I was like, really? He was like, yo, I left town. Right. But, it was one of those things where, ask for forgiveness instead of asking for permission. Beg for forgiveness instead of asking for permission. It was one of those things. And he
Mhm.
felt that, the world needed to hear this song. I remember that. Everybody in the streets was talking about it. But yeah, that story really, really stuck out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's always nice to get those hidden gems when you do, I'm sure when you do a project like this.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And knowing that, these guys' history, because, Envy and Clue were best friends, and then, you know, Puff and Envy were good friends. Like, it's all again, it's the hip hop community, especially the DJ community, it's a lot of it's camaraderie. And it's dope that
Absolutely.
even when there is an issue or a rift, they always figure it out and work it out. And these guys are really good friends to this day.
Very true. Very true. Now, two-part question here, and it's okay if you have the same answer for both.
Sure.
But what do you want general viewers to take away from the documentary?
Mhm.
And what do you believe aspiring hip hop artists can learn from the film?
General viewers, I want them to take away knowledge of where these things, where how important DJs are to the culture. I want them to take away how important the mixtape is. From remember, and people have used this term mixtape for, and one basketball, comedy shows. Like that's how influential and important the mixtape has been in our culture.
Mm,
I want people to know who set the groundwork for it,
mm.
right? What was the second part of your question?
Oh, and what do you believe hip hop artists specifically can aspiring hip hop artists can learn from
Um,
it?
I think they should know and learn that they can build off of what their predecessors have done, what
Mm,
Future have, what Fabulous, what the Locks, Cameron, 50, but also put your own spin on it to do your own thing. And as again, like J. Cole said, man, you gotta keep putting these things out. The world gotta know, the world gotta hear you. And I
yeah.
think that's what aspiring artists need to know, and they need to learn from this.
Yeah, and I think it was even included in that same the J. Cole part with the panel, right? He said like I looked at what they did and
Mhm.
then kind of fused it with what I was doing. I scrapped some of it away, kept some of it, and here I am.
There you go. You take it to the next level, and I think that's important. I think you put your own twist on it. You have your own style with it, and and it's believing in yourself. You believe in yourself. Let me tell you, Cameron and Dipset, their following is like a cult, and that's a great thing, right? Yeah, I think those guys will be able to do shows 30, 40 years from now off of the
Hmm.
mixtape. And if any, and I'm
Man.
sure there are people who said, don't do this or do it a certain way. Nah, Dipset, and shout out to Duke the God, and Karen Civil, who's in the doc. Karen Civil was, part of their promo team at the time. They made history and they make magic. And those guys are legacy artists, and they're legacy artists because of the mixtape.
Mm, mm. Very true. Very true. And kind of what I was saying earlier, it's a great first domino to have if you play it right.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Now, last question, Malik.
Sure.
Personally, coming of age for me, in the late 2000s, early 2010s, I would say of the mixtape era, I would say my favorite mixtape is Wale's More About Nothing. I feel like many mixtapes at around that time, it was a great blend of an artist showing their personality. You know, I think Wale was able to show his poetic side, his
Mhm.
intelligence, his competitive side, his skill, ambition, just everything. So, as a fan, can you let us know what your favorite mixtape is and why?
Yeah, so tough. First of all, shout out to Wale. I think Wale is one of the most underrated artists ever. He's in my top 20 of all time, maybe 10.
Hmm.
Um, Definitely the best hip hop artist from DMV area, being that I was in Morgan State. He's from DC area,
Hmm.
those neighborhoods are cousins. My favorite mixtape, I should be prepared for this. But but so Clue has an amazing catalog. But I'm gonna go with Kid Capri 52 Beats.
Mm.
And so it's to me it's classic. Um, there's break beats on there, there's blends, there's shout outs, there's a little bit of everything. Um, and I know that, um, it's funny because a lot of DJs, that's their favorite. Like that
Yeah.
is they heard that and said, I'm gonna be a mixtape DJ.
Hmm.
Um, but so there's that one, and then I got to give you one more, Doo Wop 95 Live,
Mm.
because that was the first mixtape that had artists, like artists originally, with telling their stories, doing their songs. That was the first one that kind of like, you know, ushered in really what, Clue and those guys were able to do. And Doo Wop is nice. Doo Wop can spit. Doo Wop
Yeah.
is nice.
Yeah, I loved his segment as well because I was like, that's dope that where he was like, you know what, man, I wanna rap too, like
Doo Wop and the Bounce Squad, Unique, who was the precursor to Little Kim and Nicki and Foxy. She was one of the hardest female MCs coming out of New York. Snaggerpuss with the voice, he was amazing. That the Doo Wop and the Bounce Squad, those guys were really, really dope. They actually had got an album deal, and some things happened or whatever and it didn't come out, but I had to tell that story. And I remember he's another one that he was really really cool, really inviting. I found his number, can't even remember how. He said, hey, this is where I'm going to be, meet me in the Bronx on the corner. I purchased his entire collection. He had it on a USB drive that looks like a little like surfboard. um and my camera operator is a young woman named AV Rockwell. She was my camera woman for that day. AV Rockwell is a director, a writer, director. She did the movie 1001. And so, from her, and you got DJ Envy, Kim Osara. I mean, we have so many talented people that were behind the camera as well to tell this story that, really, really grateful. But going back to your question, Kid Capri 52 Beats, Doo Wop 95 Live, it's a tie.
Ooh, ooh, good heavy hitters though, heavy hitters though, and
Yes,
people
yes.
people will notice again on this platform. They'll notice that 95 live based off the NBA Live 95
Yes,
cover.
right,
Yeah,
right, right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you have it, Malik. Thank you so much for this documentary. Just an added piece to this beautiful puzzle, huge puzzle of hip hop, allowing so many of the iconic DJs to receive their flowers and tell their stories straight from the heart and for the love of hip hop. I think many fans will enjoy and appreciate Tale of the Tape. And of course, I want to thank you for joining the show. Thank you for your time and giving some insight on the film. Before you go, can you please remind our listeners here how they can watch Tale of the Tape? And then, of course, I'll give you the floor to share anything else you want to add that I may have missed, or anything, how they can keep up with you on socials, things of that nature.
No, absolutely. Again, I want to thank you for having me. Thank you to Hip to the Games. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Tale of the Tape can be found on Amazon. It's on Amazon Prime. It is also on Spectrum. It's on Verizon. If you go to Tale of the Tape Film, it gives you links, direct links to take you to either of those. So that's how you can how you can watch the film right now. Um, I'm really really grateful to have this project come out. It'll be dope if everybody can go to Red Summer TV. That's our IG. That's our Facebook. Um, we post updates on the film there. The trailer is up. we post. Actually, there's a lot of behind the scenes footage also that we've been starting to share from the
Mhm.
DJs, some stuff that was on the cutting room floor. And then there will be other editions of the mixtape where we'll tell different iterations and different stories. So
Oh, that's dope.
yeah, RedSummerTV.com and Red Summer TV are the social handles, and Taylor the Tape Film on IG as well. So please hit the follow button, and you won't be disappointed. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we'll be looking forward to those future projects as well. There it is, another episode of Hip to the Games in the books, all for the love of the best combo there is. Be sure to show some love to Malik and check out Tell the Tape, the story on the evolution of the mixtape told from the DJs themselves who made an impact on the success of them. Peace out and God bless. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Hip to the Games. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit up the socials at Desmond Powell _ and at Hip to the Games on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok so you don't miss out on the fun. And please follow or subscribe to the show and leave a review on the podcast platform you're on right now, as your support is greatly appreciated.